I don't know if y'all heard that, but this meeting is being recorded. I wanted to welcome everyone to the Beverly School Committee's joint meeting of the Finance and Facilities and Committee of the Whole. We will have 2 chairs during this joint session, or a meeting within a meeting. So thank you all for being present this evening and bearing with us in this remote setting. Today is Wednesday, May 20th, 2020. We are meeting virtually using a remote meeting application that was provided at no cost to our district. BevCam is broadcasting another meeting for the city, so I am actually recording this meeting locally on my machine, and it will be rebroadcast later. This is allowed under the Governor's March 12th, 2020 order entitled Order Suspending Certain Provisions of the Open Meeting Law, MGL 30A, Section 20. This order specifically suspends the need for a quorum and the chair to be physically present and asks our body to use technology to allow public access to the meeting. Joining us today are members of the school committee, our citizen representatives of finance and facilities, our city council liaisons, invited guests for our agenda topics, and various members of the district administration and leadership team. We will conduct a full roll call of attendance in a moment. As a preliminary matter, we will specifically be watching for people to raise their hand, either physically to be recognized by the chairs, and in case you're not visible on the screen due to there being too many participants, we would ask that you make a sound or otherwise use the hand raise functionality within the tool. It seems to have been working relatively well, but we'll certainly endeavor to make sure that all participants of the meeting have had an opportunity to speak before any roll call votes are taken this evening. We would ask you not to use the chat function unless it relates to a technical issue about your ability to participate, as all chat functionality is being recorded and becomes part of the public record. We also ask that you speak clearly into your microphone so that we can have an adequate recording of this meeting. And please remember that any audio or video that you supply in this platform will become part of the public record. So please use your mute functionality or also disable your camera as necessary to prevent supplying any background noise or unintended video. The chair will call for you to unmute when you are recognized. Members, I'd now like to conduct a roll call to confirm that you are both able to see and hear us and participate in this remote meeting. So please do come off mute to affirm or give a huge thumbs up, but we would also like to confirm that we can hear you. So as I call the roll, I see Mayor Cahill.
Here.
Okay, I see Ms. Kimberly Coelho. I see you making the motion and you're just on mute.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, I know Ms. Kelly Ferretti has joined us and is on mute as the first few items pertain.
Hi, I'm here, yeah.
You are, okay, great.
Yes.
Mr.
Yes,
John
thank you.
Milady.
Yep, I'm here.
Similarly, thank you. And Ms. Karen Robinson.
I'm here.
Thank you so much. Ms. Lorinda Visnick, our co-chair.
Here.
Okay. And Rachel Abel. At this time, I'd like to ask Ms. Visnick to call to order the Facility and Finance meeting. I did call the joint meeting, but maybe you could call the roll for your members.
I'll do my best. This is May, as Chair Abel already said, is our May 20th, 2020 Facilities and Finance meeting. And because we're remote, every vote needs to happen as a roll call. And so we are trying to log the attendance via a verbal mechanism for those people who are either watching or listening from home and they cannot necessarily see all of us on the video screen or on the participant panel. So from the school committee, Ms. Coelho.
Yes.
Awesome, thank you. Even though you already checked in once, I apologize. Double duty, better to have twice than none. Ms. Robinson.
Here.
Myself, I'm on the committee. And we have all 3, I'm very pleased, we have all 3 of our public members in attendance today. Mr. Silva.
Here.
Fantastic, thank you. Ms. I really still have a hard time with your last name,
Okay.
Lindsay.
It's okay, it's Ducharme, I'm here.
Ducharme, thank you. And actually, I said that we have all 3, but I'm not seeing Mr. Manzo in my list right now. Mr.
He-
Manzo, are you on the call? Oh, fantastic.
I'm here, yep.
I
Oh,
think he's-
Mr. Manzo, your display name says Kathy.
Oh,
You're
so
tricking me.
I am, yes.
Okay, fantastic. Madam President, that's our role. Actually, but we have the two members of the City Council are with us as in an advisory role. So sorry, I didn't call on them. Ms. Flowers?
Yep, I'm here. Thank you.
And Mr. Rotundo?
Here, thank you.
Fantastic. All right, really, that's my committee now.
Okay, sure. And we have Ms. Laura Harrison, who's our recording secretary, pulling double duty with both of these committees tonight. So thank you for joining us. From our administration, we have Dr. Sue Chirocek, we have Dr. Dorothy Flaherty, Mr. John Harmon, Ms. Beth Splansky, and from the city, we're joined by Mr. Brian Ailes. Is there anyone else that we've not recognized that is participating this evening? Oh, I apologize.
Ms. Jean Sherburne.
Ms. Jean Sherburne, and I do see Ms. Julia Brotherton is in listen-only mode as well. I see I need to page to the next page here. I think that's everyone. I think
You have Mr. Ailes. I think he was joining us.
Yes, from the city, Mr. Brian Ailes is with us. He's on mute at the moment, and I'm sure that he will call to be recognized if he wants. I think with that, I just wanted to let everyone know that the supporting materials that are being displayed on the screen tonight were mostly distributed in advance via email, but they will become part of the record and published along with these meeting minutes for members of the public that need a closer look at anything that's shown on the screen tonight. And I've already talked about roll call votes being necessary in this remote format. So the last note I have to myself is that the Committee of the Whole does anticipate entering into executive session at the end of this meeting and not to return to open session. So we'll be doing a roll call from that. We'll be disconnecting from this line and joining a secure line. With that, I'm wondering, Mr. Silva, would you lead us in the pledge before we get into our agenda this evening? And I'm learning to tip my computer up a little bit so you don't just see my stomach. If you come off mute, we'll hear you better. It's always a challenge to do the pledge in concert. The kids in chorus are doing it though. Yes, please.
I pledge allegiance to the
The
flag
flag of the United States of America.
Of America.
And
And
to
the
the
republic for which
which
it
it
stands,
One
One
nation,
under God,
indivisible, with
liberty
and justice.
and
Justice for
for
all.
all. Thank you all. And Ms. Visnick, the floor is yours. The chairship is passed to you. If you would bring us through your agenda.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. First item on our agenda this evening is a review of the meeting minutes from our last meeting, which was held April 15th, and I can throw those on the screen if anybody wants to see them, or Madam Chair, if you think that people watching from home want to see them, take a quick glance at them, which they don't normally get to do when we meet in person.
I've stopped my original share. I realized only I saw the flag. I apologize,
It's
everyone.
okay.
Ms. Visnick, if you'd like to share, you may.
Okay, we will share. Hold on one second. This maybe, it is thinking it doesn't want to share my whole screen this evening. We had an upgrade. We had an upgrade at our company. So
I can share if you'd like. Oh,
all
you
right,
just
here we go.
you just
I'm sharing my desktop, right?
Yeah.
And there it is. So there's our meeting minutes. I apologize for that little technical difficulty.
We see your email. We see your email account.
Come on, really? No, I don't see my email account.
Well, we all do.
How about, okay. The day job. All right, then I'm just going to stop sharing. My screen sharing, it says it was paused too. Technical difficulties. All right, so we're not going to show the meeting minutes. I apologize. I would like a motion, though, from someone in our on the committee before we can discuss the meeting minutes. We need a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Can I have a second?
Second.
Oh, I missed who it was. There's too many people on the screen. How about who was? Kim, is that you? Ms. Coelho?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
All right. Now that we have a motion and a second, is there any discussion? Anybody have any corrections, any comments? All right, seeing none, there's a motion on the floor. We have to take a roll call vote. Get ready to unmute, everybody. All right, we'll go in alphabetical order, I think. We'll start with the school committee members. Ms. Coelho?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Robinson?
Yes.
Mr. Silva?
Yes.
Mr. Manzo?
Yes.
Ms. Lindsay?
I should probably abstain since I wasn't present at the meeting.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And myself, I approve these meeting minutes as well. Okay. So in the meantime, all right, our next item on our agenda is our building and grounds update. All right, so I have the agenda on my other screen, so I can't look into the camera and look at the agenda at the same time. So does anybody have any questions on the building and grounds report? Do they have any comments? Do they want to ask Ms. Sherborne, or Ms. Sherborne, maybe I should start with asking you, did anybody mail in any questions ahead of time?
No.
Okay, anybody on the call right now want to pose any questions about the report? All right, thank you, Ms. Abel, for sharing that. All right, so for people watching at home, this is a summary of each school presented alphabetically that our lead of B&G, Mr. Holland, gives to us. He highlights what's going on. Usually there's things in here, for instance, that if there was a big snowstorm, he would have something about, we had to remove snow, or, there's not a lot happening in the schools right now, but there is some maintenance that would normally happen during the summer that's happening early, and we talked about that at our last meeting. All right, so no questions on the B&G report. We'll go to the next item on our agenda. All right, so the next item on our agenda are the 4 items that compose our budget review. And
Yes,
so the first...
Can we do the update? Can Rachel put this up?
Rachel, can you put that up?
That came in a separate email, so I didn't grab it, but give me a half second to try to grab it. And
it's just a little bit of overview that I'd like to talk about the business department.
Sure.
All right, and we're going to you'd like to do that, Ms. Sherburne, and then we'll go into reviewing our revenues, our expenses, our transfers, and our gifts to schools?
Yes.
All right, and we do have items. We have a rather large transfer on which we need to vote, and we have grants and gifts to schools that we need to review and vote on as well.
I think it's 0, but yes.
Oh, I saw an attachment.
I know.
Dang it. All right, and then...
So I can start with this.
At that point in time, just for everybody on the call, at that point in time, after we do those votes, we'll open it up to the FNF committee relative to this budget presentation if they have any questions, and then I will pass the baton back over to the chair for a bigger conversation on the budget review. Okay, so that's kind of procedurally how we're going to try to handle this. Having both our FNF and our committee of the whole combined this evening to be able to smush things in the time frame and still get everything done in time to pass the budget over to the city side, have our public hearing, and then vote on it and then pass it back on to the city side. Okay, Jean, can you, Ms. Sherburne, can you see that?
Yes, I can. Thank you very much. So this is our finance and facilities update. So I'm giving an overview of the revenues and expenses primarily in this portion. We're going to have FY20 budget update, talk about our revenues, expenses, and transfers. Last month, I notified the committee that what the business department has been doing during the school closure, and one thing that I did want to pass on is that the school committee has approved payment of base wages through the end of the school year, so we're still processing payroll. Accounts payable we're processing on an ongoing weekly basis. Accounts receivable processing revenues as received, and processing refunds of tuitions due to the school closure. And we're starting to already start looking at scholarship review for FY21. Next page. The FY20 budget concerns that we have is the athletic refunds check done. The kindergarten tuition refunds have been done and processed. The preschool tuition refunds are in process this week with the city warrant schedule. And transfers of expenses charged to revolving accounts to the appropriated where we needed to have funds to maintain our revolving account balances. And you will see that later on in this meeting. And the revolving account balances, we're reviewing those just to ensure that we have the balance, what we need for the FY21 budget. Our next steps is to continue reviewing both the revenue and expense accounts for deficits and surpluses, encumbering end-of-year expenses, budget transfers if necessary, and the end-of-year closeout. So now we can start looking at the financial reports. So I don't know if anybody has any specific questions on that stuff, but that's pretty much what we've been working on. And the first one that I would look at is the revenue report.
Jean, I think it's funny that you hold it up like that as if anyone else has printed it out.
Yeah, as if they could see it.
Well, there's that too, right? But
He knows I printed it out.
Thank you, Rachel, for sharing. Thank you, Ms. Abel, for sharing that. All right, so
here is our revenue report. What we've done is we've done this report through 5/22, which hasn't even occurred yet, but what we know we were going to have deposited and would hit Munis as of that date. The reason why I wanted to do that was for the transfer, for the refunds that we've already done. So as far as our budget has remained the same this year, and we get those payments in from the city, and that we still need to have a small transfer done. The school choice estimate has not changed. We'll still be getting those on a monthly basis. The circuit breaker revenue has not changed. They are fulfilling what their requirement is for this year, and we have one more quarterly payment coming in. The special education tuitions, those funds are still coming in. The amount that's outstanding at this moment is $83,236, and that would be coming from other communities that send students into us. And we're assuming that they're going to be paying us just like we are going to be paying our out of districts to the other communities that are teaching, our students are attending. The non-resident tuition service account, those funds we actually get we get that in the spring for the following year. So those funds, we've received all of those. The next area we have is the school department fees, tuitions, and fees. The first one we have is the transportation revolving. And you'll notice that this month in the third column, there's a minus $5,748. So on this one, we had anticipated, and that's unanticipated when we anticipate in the fall, in the previous fiscal year, $218,600 would come in with fees for transportation and charter, field trips, et cetera, et cetera. What we know is we have received in $203,652, and we have some outstanding fees of $9,200. So therefore, that minus is the difference, so that we get to the forecasted of $212 from our original estimate of $218,600. Building rental fees, we have received in $137,870. We do have $8,118 that we're still trying to collect from people that have rented prior to the closure. Preschool revolving, we have $3,765 still to collect. And kindergarten revolving, we have $17,232 to still collect. The user fees for athletics, we are not anticipating any additional. And the same thing with the elementary strings and band. So if anybody has any questions in regards to revenues.
All right, I'm looking for raised hands, and I cannot see all of you on my screen at once. So if you wish to ask Ms. Sherburne any questions, please unmute and make your desire known, or hold your hand up. I'm flipping through the screen right now through all our participants. I see no hands. Ms. Sherburne, I do have a question to be super clear. Each of the items under school department fees, we still expect to collect that much in the to be collected column. So for instance, transportation revolving, those were fees that were owed before the shutdown.
Correct. Yes,
And
so
so
these are outstanding, yes.
we do expect to collect those. However, we're still going to be in the negative because we're not collecting, for instance, for all of the second semester.
Yes. However, any of the negatives that we that you do see in there, I have made sure that the revolving accounts will have, can cover that. So I'm not going to need to, other than you'll see when you do the transfers, you'll see that what I had to do so that we could do that. So
right.
All of our, excuse me, all of our revolving accounts by law will need to be in the black. So none of our revolving accounts will be in the negative state.
Right. Okay. Okay. Fantastic.
And yes, that is what we're anticipating collecting during this time of pandemic. I am not calling people when they're down and out, but we would hope that they would be able to fulfill their agreement, even if it goes into the next fiscal year to help. But they are monies owed to us.
Okay. From before shutdown. Again, just
Yes.
to be super clear about that.
Yes.
Okay. So does anybody else have any questions on the revenues report? Okay, I don't see any. So the next item on our agenda is the expenses report.
Yes, so I'd like to look at the large one, the large 38-page report.
That is scanned in sideways.
Yes, probably. Sorry.
That's okay. I don't know that we're going to share that on the screen. However, before we go into at FNF, we've talked before about so you have to kind of tilt your head for this part of the meeting. We've talked about how different people on the committee scan this report as a general rule of thumb, because it is quite lengthy, usually high 30s, low 40s in terms of numbers of pages. And that we look at the rightmost columns and we talk about, is there a balance remaining, or is there a percentage? If you're early in the year, the percentage spent for any given cost center should be relatively low. And each payroll, we should take another chunk of that, and the spend should happen, fairly linearly throughout the year. There are certainly accounts where that doesn't happen, but Jean, my question to you before we delve into this right now is, I'm anticipating that there were a decent number of items in here that are going to have balances that from which you are going to draw in order to do the transfers to balance out our revolving counts. And here's so is that part true so far?
That part is true so far, yes.
Okay, so maybe we don't want to badger you with a million questions about why is there still money left in the XYZ budget line item, because we know the schools are closed and we know we won't badger you too bad.
Thank you.
Because we're going to transfer the money to accomplish our goal of getting our revolving counts to be not, even. And the second part of my question is, from these reclaimed funds, I guess we'll call them, or from the balances that in any given line item, is there, have you finished your analysis, and is there money left over to give back to the city per the city's request in order to try to offset the fact that we know we'll have less income next year?
So we are in the process of that, looking at all of our accounts. The superintendent and myself look at it both by ourselves, and then we look at it together to see where we have some savings, potential savings that we may have. So what I have going to be able to do, and I've already spoken to Mr. Ailes and Mayor Cahill in regards to that, we do feel that there will be a surplus in the school budget this year, that we will be able to return some funds, which is unlike we usually do not have that on the school side. So we have talked to him, both of them, about that, and I'm anticipating, upwards of, say, $200,000 when we finish going through all of this, because utilities, I don't know, I'm estimating at this time, that number may grow, and by all means, anything. We're not going to be spending money just to spend money at the end of this year. We'll be sending back, but if there's things that we do need, then of course we will be purchasing them.
Okay, so with that, I guess I will open it up to questions, or maybe, Jean, do you want to say anything else? Do you want to, sometimes we ask you to give us your interpretation of the line items that have you, quote unquote, concerned if we're spending it too high of a rate. I see Mr. Silva's hand is up. I'll call you in just 1 second, Mr. Silva. So Jean, do you want to focus? Do you want to say anything before I open it up to the committee for questions?
Well, what I can tell you is that when we get into the transfer, you'll see in the grayed out portion of the transfer, that's where I have found money. I have found that we do have some savings. So, of course, our substitute account, which is OT275, which is the one that I'm always worried about, would have a surplus at this time.
Page number I can jump to? Sorry to interrupt.
32, please. I was still thumbing, but thank you. Page 32 is our OT275 substitute lines, and that balance at the end of today, or when I ran this report on the 15th, was $313,852. When you see the transfer, you're going to find that I'm using $304,000 of that, leaving a small balance, and the small balance is because we do have some long-term subs that are still working, and we still, of course, have to pay them until the remainder of the year. So that helped a lot in our situation of where we were fees that we weren't able to collect. We did have that. So it's not that we would have had that kind of money left at the end of the year, but thank goodness that we were able to offset our problem of revenues coming in, that I did have that. So that is one of the biggest areas that, of course, I tell you I always look at. The other area that I tell you that I look at is SP 860, which would be on page 37, I think. 37. And that's our collaborative and our tuition lines. And that right now has $121,992. But that is one area that we still have to make sure that we're okay with our circuit breaker revolving account. And just to make sure that all of the, everything has been encumbered that we plan to pay for out of this year's funds. So
I'm sorry, Ms. Sherburne. So, and
Yep.
then Mr. Silva, I'll call on you. So that, for instance, that account number, the SP 860, is not listed on our list of transfers, and that's because of that. You have to make sure it's because you have to kind of hold it in reserve, right?
Yes.
As
Yep.
opposed to the substitutes, we know that we're not, other than the few long-term subs that the school committee voted to pay, we're not paying any more money out of that account. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Silva, you have a question.
I was just wondering in general, and you may not be able to come up with a specific number, but in general, what the savings will be, or what the savings would be at the end of the year after all the everything's paid out.
So I anticipated with savings to go to the city, I believe I said 200 to 250,000. And that would be after we make sure that we secure our revolving accounts to have balances for what we normally charge as an offset in our budget.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, I used 200,000 for, say, transportation, 218,000 for athletics. And when with school committee voted to reduce the kindergarten fee to 0, I know that in that I needed to have $276,000 in that revolving account, and I will have that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, does anyone else on the committee have any questions about the expenditure report? I'm looking for hands both in the participant panel or in front of your camera. Mr. Manzo, I'm looking at you. You good?
Actually, Jean, can you hear me?
I can, Mr. Manzo.
So-
How are you?
Good, and yourself?
Good, thank you.
I don't have a question. I just want to see if my microphone worked.
Oh,
So, no, I'm kidding. I do have a question, or a couple.
okay.
So you've made a number of transfers to settle what you think that you're going to need for the rest of the year, and we're going to talk about that in a minute.
Yes.
And so, not to jump ahead, but it's like a big chunk of that went to food service salaries, which is understandable.
Yes.
Are we covered on all salaries until the end of the year with these transfers
Yes.
that you've made? So
these transfers that I have done is I have forecasted through the end of the school year any revolving accounts that we're going to be paying for them to make sure that they have the, I've moved the expenses into the appropriated budget.
Okay. And so then I'm still looking at some of the lines, and I'm sure you're going to be looking at some of them over the next couple months. Things like, overtime accounts where maybe people aren't working overtime. For example, custodial accounts. They're getting a lot of their work done during the regular,
Yes.
shifts. And so I assume there'll be some left over there. And do you know what we're doing with contracted services for special education? So I assume that there's some students still getting services, but maybe the transportation accounts might be another place to look at for recovering some funds.
Right. So what we have been doing is looking at all accounts. So there's a few things that I did while I was eating my dinner, waiting for the meeting to begin. I looked at different various accounts. So utilities is one of them that I'm looking for, and I'm hoping to see that it's even higher. I did speak to a city councilman this week, and he was telling me on just his business, he noticed a substantial decrease, and I just don't have those bills yet. So right now I'm just comparing from last year to this year, and I do feel that I'm going to have a savings there that may grow larger. The school's interdisciplinary accounts, we're looking at those. Anybody that has an item that they normally pay in May, so sometimes we have licensures that are due and the payment is due in May, so we're going to know that they're going to have those type of purchases. We're going to fulfill those because if it goes from May to May next year, we do need to pay for that, even though it's, at the end of this year, it is for an annual contract. Buildings and grounds, I did look at some of their accounts. I need to work with Tim Howland and Mr. Collins to see if there's anything that I'm not aware of that they're planning on doing. So I've asked them to tell me what needs to be encumbered that's not. A lot of those items do not get encumbered because it's like all of a sudden we need to fix something. So of course we don't want to let our buildings go amok. So we need to make sure we're taking care of anything there. I do feel that there's going to be a savings in that line. I did look at the custodial overtime. I'm looking at there's approximately 50,000. So all of these items that I'm talking about right now are coming up with the 200 to 250 that I've told the mayor. One area that I'm looking at is Nature's Classroom did not occur. So one thing that that when you were on the school committee, we voted to pay for the transportation and for the teachers' stipends that the overnight, we don't want to pass that on to the students. So that is going to be a savings. It's in an account with something else, so it's not always so clear to see, but I do know that it's going to be there. Fuel for the buses is going to be a savings, and maintenance on the buses, there's going to be some savings. The mechanic is still working during this closure, fixing and getting the buses inspected. So I do feel that there's going to be a savings. So those are the areas that I know for sure, and the rest I have to really still keep looking at, making sure that we have all the encumbrances in from the schools. One area that we have is that, school stay at home. There's a lot of things that may be coming into the school that I haven't received yet. So like bills that maybe weren't quite encumbered yet. So those are the types of things that we're working with the principals and the school secretaries on. I'm just going to add a little thing because now that you got me on my soapbox here, sorry. One of the things is the unknown costs. So what are some of the unknown costs? So you did mention SPED contracted services for transportation. So we're still working. The superintendent is listening to her superintendent listservs. I'm listening to my school business listservs. And what we're finding out is what can we do? So, do we need to pay them for services? Is there a certain percentage? So all of us business managers are talking to each other. Hey, if you can make a deal with somebody, let me know so that we can get, what we can. So that's an area. And I just texted Mr. Harmon earlier today and said, have we seen anything on unemployment yet? And we still haven't even seen March, never mind April. So I'm still holding my breath on that. Not that we had a lot because we kept paying everybody and that's why we wanted to. But there are the daily subs and people that worked for us previously, went to another employer and got laid off, will get hit with some of their unemployment costs.
Great. Thank you, Jean.
All right, so here's our last call, one last call. Ms. Robinson, Ms. Coelho, my city councilor friends, I have 4 of you on my screen right now. Do you want to give me a thumbs up? You want a head nod? Does anybody have any questions? Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Thank you, Ms. Coelho. Todd, you're good? Okay. All right, Mr. Silva, you already unmuted and asked a question. So I think we're done on the expenditure report. And
so that was what I consider the large one, which is SO1. And then we have SO2 and SO3. I don't think that Ms. Abel needs to pull those up. That is our state grants and our federal grants. And so that's just, I'm trying to each month remember to print those out for the committee. But those are grant funding. We have had no grant reductions in any grants. These go over this fiscal year into the fall. So if anybody does have any particular questions, we do have 2 state grants that Ms. Abel is putting up. So the state grants start with an S. A 20 means that it is the fiscal year 20. And then the grant numbers. So the first one you have there is the Health One Comprehensive School Health Services Grant. And that one because of the closure, I need to find out where they're spending the money. And again, most of these roll over into the next fiscal year. And the other one is the Turnaround Assisted Grant, which is also known as the TAG grant that the superintendent and assistant superintendent manage. And then the other report that you received was SO3, which is our federal funding, and that starts with an F for federal, 20 for the school fiscal year, and then the DESE grant number 140 for Title II-A and Title III, et cetera, et cetera. And these grants have some salaries and have some expenses, but whatever is not expended this year gets rolled over into the next fiscal year on most of them. If not, we will make sure that they have expended them. And we can do amendments. I believe that Ms. Flaherty, Dr. Flaherty was doing an amendment just recently on one of those.
Didn't hear it.
I'm sorry, somebody just unmuted, or maybe they didn't mean to be heard and they muted.
She didn't mute, just not, did any of you?
So I think that's Mayor Cahill.
I think that's Mayor Cahill as well.
Mayor Cahill, and I don't think he had a good connection.
Sorry. All right, did he drop though? Do I see him? All right, I think he dropped. Maybe he'll jump back in. All right, so does anybody have any questions on the grant reports? I don't see any hands. Okay. All right. So that brings us to the big transfer.
Yes.
Miss Abel, can you put that up on the screen for us? Could you be so kind?
Thank you.
Awesome.
So as the school committee is aware, anytime that a transfer that needs to be made from one cost center to another cost center, I do need to bring that to school committee for approval. So in other words, if something is going from an AY account to a OT account or a CE to a CO, those are what comes to you. If I could do a transfer that's within the cost center, those necessarily do not have to come to you for approval. So what I have done here is looking at the kindergarten revenues decreases that we were going to be receiving because of the closure, the preschool decrease, and the custodial salaries is there based on the decrease in revenues for the building rental revolving account. As you know, we have the YMCA that rents out the after-school program, and that's where we receive a bulk of our money. And then we have, dance recitals, et cetera, that we have that brings the monies in. And then the last one that you see in the white area at the top is the food service salaries. So as you know, that we have informed, the school committee has approved that we're going to pay everybody their base salaries until the end of the year. The food service sales, because we're feeding the students at no cost to them, we do get some subsidies from the federal government for the lunches served, but obviously our lunch counts are extreme down low. So what I've done here is I have created an account that's called NI 356-61000, food service salaries, because generally speaking, you do not pay for any food service. It's self-operating revolving account. So I've looked at this and needed $179,403 for the remainder of the year. And I'm going to be doing this transfer. When I've completed this transfer, that would leave the revolving account with the balance of what they would have had in their account before the school closure. What I may be doing another adjustment, the reverse way, if we get enough funding from the federal government for the lunches that we're serving, and now that I'm not charging all of the salaries to the revolving, most of them are coming to the appropriated, I will be looking at that. I do not want that to grow more than what they had previously. So I am doing this right now to cover all the salaries, but if we do find the revenue comes in higher, because we just get a certain percentage of each meal, I may be doing a slight change the other way, but that's to stay tuned. Right now, I'm asking for that because this is what I do know right now, is that I need to have those salaries covered by the appropriated. The items in the gray area is where I was taking the monies from. I found it easier to go to the areas that I know, which of course is the substitutes and the long-term substitutes. And then the areas that I do know is the AD, which is the administration lines. So I was able to do that. I do need to make one correction. When I was double checking my work, my salary contingency line only has $57,061. So I need to take $2,000 off of that. And I'm going to correct the last line, which is telephone, and take $31,858.54 from that account. So I must have hit the 9 instead of the 7 when I was double checking my work. And so these accounts are obviously areas that we know that we're having savings. We're not going to have any more snow removal. The teacher fellows came in a little bit less.
Please don't jinx us, okay?
I know,
with
true.
the snow removal.
True. And one of the teacher fellows was actually paid by a grant, so I had the extra money in the high school one. Then I looked at the administrative assistant in the HR department. We had a resignation just before. We're actually in the process of interviewing. So that's the funding that's available for the remainder of this year. However, if we are able to get back into the office and be able to have the person that we were interviewing start, then I will move some funds back in there. But right now, as of today, I felt we could use that, but I don't want John to get nervous to think that I cut the position, because I did not. The funding was excess funding that we had. Then I looked at just different various accounts, advertising, substitutes for custodians, and some telephone and communication lines. I didn't go in deeply and find out what else we have. I just needed to cover that shortfall that we did have. Any questions?
Okay, so before we take questions, I need a motion to approve these transfers. Thank you, Mr. Manzo. I saw your hand. So moved.
Yep. So moved, yep.
Can I have a second? Second.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Coelho. All right, so now that the motion's on the floor, does anybody have any questions for Ms. Sherburne about this big batch of transfers? Yes, Mr. Manzo.
So, Jean, I'm looking at what we had needed to add back to the kindergarten salaries. So it looks like it totals about $183,000 to balance the kindergarten salaries.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems to exceed what we expect to be losing in tuition revenue. And so, are we building up that revolving account, or?
We were building the revolving account to have $276,000 in there to carry over and to cover the free full day kindergarten next year.
Okay, and the same with preschool. It looks like you're putting a little bit more in there than you lost in revenue.
So the preschool, yes, I was putting in to make that to have the same balance that we had in the previous year. So I did have. We're covering for a teacher, and I think it was a paraprofessional in that line. And so therefore I'm trying to maintain the amount that we had in the FY20 budget offset in those revolving accounts, so that we're not, trying to build a budget in knowing that we still need more money for, revenue shortfalls.
Okay, thank you, Jean.
You're welcome.
So, Gina, I have a very similar question about the food service. What you said about putting returning the food service revolving account back to the value that was there before we went into shutdown.
Yes.
So that's the same idea. Is that then we just want to leave that account in a certain shape as we build the budget for next year.
Yes. Right. Yes.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to scroll through the list of participants, and okay, so on my screen right now, I have my my city council friends and my 2 fellow school committee members. Do any of the 4 of you have any questions? I see a lot of head negatives. Okay, head nods this way as opposed to this way. All right, on my first screen, I have Mr. Manzo and Mr. Silva. So going once, going twice. Any more questions? All right, so there's a motion on the table to accept these transfers, and we need a roll call vote. So we'll go to members of the public. Yes, ma'am.
Can we have that to accept these transfers with the change that I made?
Yes, thank you very much. The motion to accept the transfers with the $2,000 change is highlighted on the screen right now. A value of $57,061 out of $8,761,013, and increased value of $31,858.54 out of BG 880 62,725, the telephone. Okay. Yes. All right. So we're going to go left to right as I see people on my screen. So Mr. Silva.
Yeah.
Thank you. Kim Coelho.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Manzo.
Yes.
Thank you. Lindsay.
Yes.
Thank you. Miss Robinson.
Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you. And myself. Yes.
Thank you.
All right. So the next item on our agenda is supposed to be gifts to schools, but there is none.
There is none yet. So we just wanted to report there was no gifts to schools.
We got a little trick there. All right. And
so Ms. Visnick, I think the only thing we want to make sure is that we tell them when our next F&F meeting is, but I think you're going to go into the FY21 budget presentation. I assume that the F&F people are going to stay on for that.
Yes.
Okay.
The F&F people get a first dibs at questions on that, and
Okay.
then it gets open to the whole floor, and I pass the chair, the baton, over to Rachel, Miss Abel.
Okay, we just wanted to make sure that we tell them when the next F&F is in case they depart and the rest of the committee of the whole continues. That's all.
Okay, so when have we? Is that on my calendar yet, Miss?
It would be in June, and it will be June. I think 17th, 24th, or 24th. June 24th is our next meeting. It's at 6:30 because it's backed up to a committee of the whole.
Okay, and I'm sure we'll give our FNFers a good week's notice. And in our virtual world, I've been asking, and who knows, maybe we'll get to meet in person by then. But I tried to give them a little notice and ask if they're going to be here, if we should hold the meeting, waiting for someone to join versus getting started.
Yes, and I think the person that we had scheduled for that would be the Buildings and Grounds, asking them to come in.
Right, the end of the year report.
I think we would ask for them to attend that meeting.
Okay, great.
Okay, thank you. I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the next item on our agenda, who's going to share? Dr. Chirocek,
yes.
You're going to share?
Thank you.
You're on mute, Dr. Chirocek.
Yeah. So would you like me to share? I think I have it set up and ready to go. So
yes, please.
Okay. Have I shared?
Yes,
ma'am.
All right, very good. Thank you very much. So you want me to jump right in?
Yes.
Go for it.
Both
All
feet.
right. All right. Well, so good evening. Thank you very much. I'm here obviously this evening to present the draft budget for the FY21 school year. As you are all aware, the spring has brought us a challenging and unprecedented series of events that has led to this draft version of the budget. I was here, gosh, was it 3 months ago? I think it was February 29th was the last time I did a formal presentation of the FY21 budget, and we were in a very different place. So here we are now, and I'm going to share with you what we have prepared moving forward. So first, as I did before, and as I always will do, I'm going to direct everyone to our district goals, because we really do believe that it is our mission and what we do for our schools, and it's very, very important. And I believe that even in these unprecedented times, we have to make sure that whatever we do, our goals drive our budget and our budget supports our goals. So I just sort of wanted to remind everybody about who we are and what we do and what we value. And so if you remember, engaged learning, rigorous and consistent curriculum, innovative practices, and sound management practices. So we want to keep our eye on that. And tonight, before I begin, I also just want to take an opportunity, because in all that we've been doing, it's really important to give a shout out to our teachers and our administrators. They've lived up to these goals, even in these times, even with everything that they were facing. I think it's important, the teachers, how they jumped in and worked around student engagement and access for everyone throughout the first few weeks of the closure. They were doing work that they never dreamed was part of their job description, I'm sure. We had principals delivering Chromebooks. We had teachers going around and making videos and really, really looking out for the social emotional well-being and welfare of all of our kids. So I think that's really important for us to understand. Rigorous and consistent curriculum. I think there were about 3 U-turns that we took throughout the course of the last 9 weeks. The commissioner would come out with a new set of guidance and say, all right, we're going to do enrichment. Oh, no, now we're going to do some power standards. And every step along the way, our teachers pivoted and they gathered together and they really joined in so that we were kind of doing everything that we could do to meet the needs of all of our students. And then finally, the innovative practices. They've done it in the most innovative and creative way that could ever be said. I've never seen such professional growth in such a short period of time across the board for all of our educators. So I just think it's really important. I was reminded when I looked at the goals that we kind of forget that sometimes, this is who we are and what we do. And so just a huge shout out. We really honor our teachers. We honor our educators, our administrators, everybody that's pitching in and doing it. So I just wanted to take a moment before I started to kind of make sure that I shared that thought before I jump into the budget. So here we go into the budget, but I think before we even talk specifically about the school budget, and I know that some of this will be a repeat. If you were in our meeting last week, Brian Ailes did a presentation for all of us around some of the current economic conditions. This is what's driving the quick change to our focus in the budget and some of our costs that we're looking at. I wanted I'll touch base a little bit on the reduction in revenues on the municipal budget, the governor's budget, and where we stand with that. I'm going to touch again on contractual obligations, which are really important factors that will impact this FY21 budget. And then finally, I'll do a quick review of the increased enrollment and the changes in staffing that we anticipate as a result of that. So just as we start off, and this is really, as I said, it's a review for many of you that were here last week, but the outlook for the municipal budget. In revenues, there's a 50% reduction from FY20 in building permits, an 80% reduction in meals and room tax, an overall 15% reduction, and some would say that might be an optimistic number, which is kind of frightening, in state aid. And I know that the mayor and Bryant are spending, a lot of time tracking and following, as are all of you. And so I think that's really important to share. And then finally, a 15% reduction on the motor vehicle excise tax. So, this is just important for us to keep in mind because we are a department of the city. We work within the city, and we want to work in partnership as we create our budgets as well. So, finally, there's the estimated cost increases. It's not, we can't really just think about FY21. I've been studying hard and following and listening very closely to Bryant. So, Mr. Ailes, thank you very much for your lessons that you've given me over the last few weeks. But we really have to think about this in terms of not just 1 year, but, multiple years. And so there are concerns, particularly beyond the FY21 budget into the FY22 budget, that the estimated cost increases that we face are over $5 million. And that includes the debt service that's going to come online for the middle school and the police station, pension costs, healthcare estimates, the recycling sanitation costs that we may be facing, and then salary adjustments. And those are the steps and columns for the schools alone. That's just the estimate that we have. So, and then finally, this has been emblazoned into my brain as I spent the last week looking over things. And Brian had shared this, and I just think it's important to just remember as we look that, there's modeling that we are looking to, or the economists are looking to, as we sort of move into a recession, right? And so this is the trajectory during the last 2 recessions in the early 2000s and the late 2000s. And I actually, in addition to this one particular graph in a conversation that I just had, it was pointed out that, these recessions took place over 2 years. We're talking about a recession that's happening, in a period of months. So again, this is just, and not to be all gloom and doom, but I sort of did want to just sort of set the stage to let everybody know what we're facing, and that we are, as a school department, keeping a very close eye and are mindful of what constraints we might be facing. So, now I think, the last thing I wanted to say before I move ahead, the legislative process. Sorry, this is the last thing. And Senator Lovely spoke to this also last week. The governor, we know what our FY20 Chapter 70 money was. And we know that in January, the governor came out with an estimate that we would be getting $10,262,735. We know now that first of all, the entire governor's budget is subject to review and reduction. And so we really don't have that number to lie on anymore. The House Ways and Means and the Senate budgets are not yet released. We heard Senator Lovely state that there may be opportunities for them to work together. I'm not really sure how that will go, but we know that we have uncertainty around that. And so we'll all be waiting to kind of hear what that has to say. So before I go any further, I think I really want to, well, I'll do this one first, sorry. We are in negotiations. We're currently we have resumed our negotiations with the union. We've met a couple of times and we have a plan to meet again. But just keeping in mind what our contractual obligations are within the contract that we have. Our 1% of our COLA for all of our employees in Beverly would be $443,310. 2% would be $886. This is sort of a trick that I took from Steve Hershey, always trying to get these numbers that can be your benchmark numbers, so you have some place mark in your head of what you're looking at when you talk about increases. And so those are the increases that we anticipate or that are part of our contract right now. We are obligated for steps for $514,000, and we have lane obligations for $180,000. And then we have our estimate from Mr. Ailes regarding healthcare, and that would come in at $227,000. So those are the contractual obligations. As I move forward, I talked earlier a little bit about enrollments. And are the numbers blocked for you, or is it just me because I have pictures here? Still trying to learn my Zoom.
The numbers are not blocked for me.
The numbers are not blocked.
Not
okay,
blocked.
I keep moving the pictures around, hoping that I'm, taking everybody's view away. So I just wanted to give a quick review on enrollments. I gave you the numbers back in February. I had Donna redo them. These are numbers as of Friday. They have not changed too much. However, we do have increases in enrollments, and you can see how they have trended in this year in particular. And I'm not sure why, but we have a huge increase in rising first graders for next year. Our rising first grade has us at 436. That is a historical number as far as I can tell right now in terms of a one grade cohort. Our other grades, as you can see, as we predicted over the last couple of years, have remained steady, but steady for us, the new steady, which used to be around 340 or 330, is now 360. And so we are at a steady 360 in all of the other grades, with a total elementary enrollment K to 4 of 1,901 students. Our middle school enrollments also have flattened out or become a little bit more stable in prediction, with the exception of the rising grade 7. That rising grade 7 was the original grade 5 to go to the new middle school. We knew that it was large. It's remained right around 400 at 395. And again, the other 3 grades are pretty steady at the 360 mark, so to speak. So our anticipated enrollment at middle school is 1,483. And then our high school numbers have seen probably the greatest increase. And I think one of the challenges we face in high school, as you know, is the schedule is very different. And our bulk of our students are in grades 10 and 11. And that is a challenge for scheduling in terms of elective courses and core content. But I've been working with Mrs. Taylor and trying to determine what her needs will be. She's anticipating an enrollment of 1,342. And that brings the district total to 4,726. That is, if you look back to FY19, almost a 300 student increase over the past 3 years. So that's a pretty high number. Those are pretty high enrollment numbers. We also have our preschool, and Ms. Splansky has shared with me her enrollment anticipation for FY21 is 135, which is a higher number. Preschool's a little more difficult because they come for 2 years. And so, always anticipating who's coming in out of early intervention and knowing who's graduating out. And so that's what we're facing for FY21. And the very, very good news in the midst of all of it is if you look at our out-of-district numbers, our out-of-district numbers are steadily decreasing, which speaks to the great work of our special education department and Ms. Splansky in bringing kids back in district. So next year we anticipate having 77 students out of district. I think we have some changes in staffing. And so we worked really hard to determine where we could make reductions, where we might need increases. I've met with each and every administrator, really trying to find places where we can make decreases that don't that we can manage, right? That we can swallow, that we think that will not really disrupt the service delivery to our students. And so one of the areas we know we need to increase is our preschool. We need to add an intensive preschool teacher. We actually probably could have tried to add it earlier this year, but we struggled through and we juggled kids around and we managed to stave it off. But for next year, we're really going to need to add an intensive preschool teacher. I showed you the first grade numbers, and what that's translating into is an increase in the Cove School in grade 1 and in the Hannah School in grade 1. And I just will put on your radar that we're actually watching the Cove School because the numbers are almost so high that we maybe anticipated needing an additional first grade there. But we do not know yet what enrollments will look like. So we're going to just sort of mark it as a watch and keep our eye on it. As of right now, we're okay. But if we were to get a huge increase in Cove in the first grade, we'd be looking at needing to add there. In the meantime, we looked very closely at our enrollment numbers, and we were able to decrease due to enrollment numbers and shifting in some places. A teacher in 4th grade at Ayers, a teacher in 3rd grade at Cove, a kindergarten teacher at Hannah, and a 1st grade teacher at North Beverly. So we believe those will all be managed through attrition. So it's not as if we're saying that teachers will not have a job. We will utilize openings through attrition so that it's not elimination of people, but of positions. We have in middle school, again, we're looking at our enrollments, and in the middle school, not only do we have enrollments that have shifted with the largest class entering 7th grade, we have the structure of how we deliver and set up our teams. So our teams in grades 5 and 6 were largely 2-person teams and 1 3-person team. Based on the enrollment that we see, we think that we can decrease 1 position in 5th grade and 2 positions in 6th grade, but those are really shifting up to support 7th grade in other places because that large class is moving up. So the increase in academic support in grades 7 and 8, 1 position will be utilized by the administration to decrease class sizes in the content areas, however they choose to do it. The increase in academic support for grades 7 and 8, that's the Success Academy. That's a new name, that's what we're calling it, but that's the program that really supports social emotional students. It helps us transition students who have been hospitalized. It provides supports for students that are struggling with anxiety. And we felt like we really were committed to making sure that we were providing some academic support for that program that we began last year. And so that's an increase in 1 position that we really feel like is necessary in order to maintain the service delivery for students that at the level that they need. The rising enrollment in 7th grade it supports an increase in a learning center position in the 7th grade, and as well as the increase for the middle school in the global apps position. The global apps are what you might think are electives, and those are art and music and STEM, and we know that that has been a constant struggle for us for the last 2 years, and now with an increase of students in that building, that is 2 positions that we need to support. So that's at the middle school. And then finally, here's the high school. And the high school, as I said earlier, is our biggest challenge in terms of the enrollment increase and the need to support the schedule. 1 position that we need to add is the ELL position. We have the numbers in ELL have grown at the high school, as well as you all know that learning a new language in your high school years in the content levels that we're offering and the academic rigor at the high school, it necessitated an additional ELL position. And Mrs. Taylor, in looking at how she needed to readjust her schedule to accommodate the increased enrollments, particularly in the 10th and 11th grade, has asked for a social studies position and a business technologies robotics teacher. We hope we're going to find that one person that's going to do business technology and robotics. So if you know anyone, let's be thinking about that. And then finally, again, increasing the academic support. Her Beacon program is the same program as the Success Academy. Given the trauma and given the events that we're all dealing with, a number of students who will be returning that may have losses in their families, that may have just had, some very traumatic events that they've been through, we know that we're going to have to be supporting our students as strongly and as best as we can. And so that's for that program there. So, and before I even go here, I think there's just one other thing that I want to say. We built this budget predicated on the assumption that we're going to return to a brick and mortar delivery of instruction in September, which none of us know whether or not that's what's going to happen. But we believe, while we built the budget this way, we are contingency planning for several different ideas and thoughts of what might happen. We are building it for a physical attendance and what that will cause us to have. That's the staffing levels and making sure that we're level staffed. We're looking at a hybrid model, whether or not we'd need to have staggering attendance, whether or not we'd have to have staggering arrival and dismissal. And then finally, we're also thinking about the possibility that we just may be opening in remote. So there are a lot of unknowns that we have. There is, we have concerns as we move forward that we've built the budget and tried to anticipate in each and every cost that we would need to level service our students. But again, there are uncertainties. So I just will be hoping for flexibility and understanding as we go into next year and try to figure out what we need. This is sort of my final slide, the appropriated budget. So the draft budget that I'm putting forward to you tonight, there's last year's budget. In FY20, the city contribution was $51,763.75. We had Chapter 70 funding of $9,257,567 for a final budget appropriation of $61,017,942. In our conversations and discussions with the mayor and Bryant, we're hopeful that we can have some additional appropriation to the budget this year. We worked really hard to try to trim and not add in anything that we didn't think was absolutely necessary. If we were level funded from FY20, we would need $61,017,942. We're hoping for a draft budget appropriation of $62,517,942. So that's the budget that we built. That's what we have right now, and identifying, the staffing that we need, and then level servicing what we have so far. So I think I'm open for questions.
All right, thank you, Dr. Churchick. I certainly have a good handful in front of me. However, I would love to open the floor to my fellow members of FNF, and I'll just remind everybody else on the call, our plan is to, quote unquote, close out FNF, and then let the committee of the whole kind of
this is the committee of the whole as well. But yeah, please, by all means, if FNF would like to, I have questions. We also need to talk quickly as committee of the whole about the rest of the timeline. So those questions will be coming. Right.
Absolutely. It's kind of a first dibs kind of thing. So for anybody on FNF, because then the FNFers can go if they so choose, if they don't want to stay for the rest of, quote unquote, rest of the meeting. Do I see any, sorry, somebody just came in the room. Do I see any hands? Do I have anyone else on the committee that wishes to ask any questions about this budget? Yes, Mr. Silva.
Am I unmuted?
You are unmuted. We can hear you.
In terms of the 1.5 million that's being asked for additional, appropriation. Does are there a couple major areas where that funding where that's coming from? Is it mostly personnel?
Well, we as you know, we are in negotiations, and so we know what our contractual obligations are in terms of that, and we know what our enrollment obligations are, and so really that's the area. That's all there is. There's no, I think when we presented our budget in February, we all had high hopes that we were going to have our incremental increase from the state, which included the Student Opportunity Act and a number of initiatives and ideas and thoughts that we would be able to expand upon. I don't know if you remember that original iteration, but we had curriculum directors and we had increased school adjustment counselors and we had additional programming that we are not able to move forward with right now. This budget is really taking the level service that we have right now for our students and accounting for the contractual obligations and the increased enrollments.
Are you all set, Mr. Silva?
Yes, thank you.
All right. Anybody else on the committee? My members, other members of the public?
Mr.
Kim,
Manzo.
Mr. Manzo.
Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Just real quick. So this current year, we had an unanticipated cost for a lot of it went to food service salaries. Are we going to be looking to put something aside in case we have to go down that road again this next year?
Can you mean the salaries that Jean moved in the last meeting,
Right.
that transfer? Is that what you're talking about?
Right. Because if you look at the transfers that she made, the kindergarten salaries, well, they're going to go away because you're absorbing all that into the budget anyways.
Yeah.
And so then the other big chunk of money that she had to cover were the food service salaries. And so if you were faced with that sort of problem again,
so
do you have a place to go to?
That's a good question. I think that's why Jean made sure that she did not leave that she returned that food service account to the point it was before the closure. Jean, am I correct about that?
Yes. That's where one of the areas. And what we would be looking at, Mr. Manzo, is, what is the delivery? Are we not if we're working remote, then we're going to have some substitute salary savings that we could offset it. So we're not building money into the budget for that, because if we are not going to be able to come back, then our food service delivery would be different.
I see. Thank you.
I actually think some of the biggest questions that we have is what are the unanticipated costs that we might have in either returning physically or not returning physically. I think that the challenge for us is, and the biggest challenge is if it's some form of a hybrid, right? Because then we're going to be incurring costs that we would incur because we weren't open, and then incurring costs that we would incur because we are open. We have transportation is a huge question mark for us. We will no longer have 72 students riding a bus, I don't think. That's a challenge, and that's a conversation and some decisions that we need to make. PPE, I know that we're fortunate that there's some money coming in the form of the CARES Act to help us, but physical adjustments to the building, how do we furniture wise, do we have what we need in order to safely open and to set up a building the way with and we don't even know what the restrictions are yet. So these are the things so we made the decision to go forward, create the budget that we would need to level service if we opened, and then work within that based, as Jean said, shifting our priorities from one cost center to another based upon what that opening looks like.
Thank you.
Okay, do any other members of F&F, before I call on myself, have any questions? All right, Dr. Churchick, one of my, I see none, by the way. One of my very specific questions has to do with, you mentioned the SOA funding and the things we're not going to be able to move forward with. However, in one of our meetings before we went into shutdown, we voted to go into an agreement with
Essex.
Thank you. It's the name change. I've lived here too long to go through the different names for the After Dark program.
Yep. So I will. Yep. I can speak to that. I actually spoke with the superintendent in the past week. We have accounted for the students that have been accepted. We had 21 students that applied and were accepted. They will be attending. We were, one of the things that happened is originally the amount that you appropriated in your vote was 120,000. That number, given that she has received some funding already, and we are still hoping for more grant funding, but in the budget we reduced that number down to 80,000 because she assured me that we would be able to, that would be enough money to cover the 21 students that we have going in, which, I think is really fortunate for us. So again, and we are still holding out hope. If in fact there's a grant application that's in, it could be that that number will go down even more, and that will be really helpful to all of us. But for now, we have budgeted within the budget for that program and for those students. So that's
fantastic. That's great news. Yeah. Thank you. And my other question has to do with the slide. If you want to scroll backwards to where we're going to find some savings, where we're going to decrease our staff. I'm a little perplexed. It would be great if we could split screen, but yes, this one, the decrease in elementary. I'm a little, the split screen would be great right here if we could also be looking at our enrollment. So I'm a little concerned, other than our kindergarten drop, because this year's kindergarten was so gosh dang huge. Every other one of those grades on where you're planning to decrease a teacher has an increase in enrollment. Yeah. Perhaps not a great increase, right? Grade 3 is only 9, but at our first grade is an increase of 64 students. Yeah. So I wonder if you can speak to how on God's green earth we're going to reduce a kindergarten teacher when we have 64 additional children going into that grade.
Right. So if you look at the reduction of the first grade teacher, it's at North Beverly. The increase of students is at the Cove School. So it really depends on which students are attending which school. So it doesn't necessarily look at the whole cohort, whether it's a decrease or an increase. It looks at the enrollment at that individual building. So at the North Beverly school, the rising kindergarten only warrants 3 sections where they had 4 sections this year. And the 4 sections enrollment can be managed in 3 sections in second grade based upon the numbers. So so that's how that works. At Ayers, the current 4th grade numbers are higher than the current 3rd grade. The rising 4th graders can be condensed into 3 classrooms. The same thing at Cove. The rising 2nd grade, the 2nd grade can be condensed into 3 classrooms as they're rising 3rd graders. They're going to and so on. So it depends on the individual numbers at each building and how many are going up and how we're going to be able to do that. So that's why that worked that way.
I can certainly appreciate that. Thank you. I wonder if we couldn't have the report that.
I can get to that. Yeah, no worries. Yeah.
Well, it's just going to be. I think it's hard to think about it at the macro level. Because like I said, some of the numbers are huge, and then if we're going to be asked to vote on the budget without actually seeing the class size numbers, to think about, okay, I am taking, like you just said, we're going to go from 4 kindergarten classrooms down to 3 first grade classrooms at a given school. What does that actually mean for what the class sizes are for those 3 sections at that one elementary school?
At Hannah, if you remember, it was the half day, and the students were from all over the district, so they all returned back to their home schools. So Hannah had a kindergarten classroom that was made up of students from across the city who were in half day, and so they're all returning back to their home schools. So that class really just disbanded across the district.
Okay.
In the kindergarten, that was the kindergarten scenario at Hannah.
Okay.
But we always include those in the. I think they're in the book that we do, but I also have a spreadsheet, so I can share that with everybody too.
All right, fantastic. And then just to be very crystal clear, I think you answered this when speaking with one of the other questions. The thought of a staggered arrival time you mentioned. That would also greatly increase our transportation costs, but we're not budgeting for that right now, correct?
We need some guidance, and we need to know what the restrictions are, and we need to have a better handle on. And so there's a number of things. On the one hand, I have some concerns about what the restrictions are going to be and what we're going to be allowed to do. I have some question about what the appetite for the community is going to be, and if there are, how many. We're planning, sort of attempting to plan a contingency for maybe some families that are experiencing illness or some things, and they're not sending their kids back to school. So, we really have a lot to figure out, and a lot of it is going to depend on what happens in the next few weeks, what happens in the summer, what's allowed, what we can see works and doesn't work. Right now, I spoke with Ms. Splansky, and I think she is on the call, but we're right now moving forward planning for a remote summer school for our extended school year for our special ed students. But we're waiting for more guidance as we go along. I think that she's surveying families and parents. We don't know. We just don't know what the restrictions. I was in a meeting with the North Shore Collaborative. Same thing. They are kind of bandying between what will the extended school year look like, what will they be allowed to do, what will they be required to do. It goes in. There's just a number of uncertainties that we have, and so. On top of which, what does that look like if we are allowed to open? Are we allowed to open at 40% capacity? And so do only 40% of the students are 20%, or, we don't know what that will look like. And, we do have a great task force going with our administrative leadership team. We will be engaging stakeholders in conversations, but until we have some guidance, we're kind of planning for all three different eventualities, and then, hoping to be able to make decisions as we go along. And I wish I could have more answers, but until I know, and I do think the next few weeks will bring us more answers. I do think that hopefully by the end of June, we'll have a better handle on some of this. And particularly fingers crossed if everyone continues to do their part and do what they need to do to help continue to go in the direction that we're going, we'll be fortunate enough to be able to have a little bit more guidance and direction as to where we're going.
Right. That's understandable. Again, I just wanted to make sure that for clarity's sake that you mentioned that as a possibility, and that we were not making any accommodations in the budget as it stands, as it is currently proposed.
Right.
Okay, fantastic. One last call to members of Finance and Facilities if you have any questions. Otherwise, I'm going to turn the chair over to our real chair, Rachel Abel, and the questions will be open to the Committee of the Whole. Madam Chair, I see none.
Okay, thank you. So members of Committee of the Whole, hopefully you were able to learn from the questions that have been presented by FNF. This is our additional opportunity to ask Dr. Chirocek and Ms. Sherburne about the proposed budget. I don't know if we want to go back to slide, well, second to last slide.
That one?
Yes, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
These be the numbers. And I think Dr. Chirocek did a good job outlining the fact that, we need to prepare our budget. The city is moving forward, obviously, with the appropriation process. And we're looking at some timelines of actually putting this to a public hearing next week. So this would be our opportunity before the budget book is published. Is it coming as soon as tomorrow? Or is it just the notice that goes tomorrow, Ms. Sherburne?
All right, I was trying to unmute myself. So the advertisement has to be tomorrow. I will be having the document ready by Tuesday at 2:00 is when it has to be available for the public for our public hearing on Thursday, 48 hours in advance. So,
And for new members that haven't been playing along at home for a few years, the budget book gets into a lot more detail than these slides, where each of the cost centers has a summary view. And those enrollments that Ms. Visnick was asking about are also presented. But basically it rolls up to these numbers that we have presented on this slide. So with that context, are there questions from the committee? I'm not seeing any hands. Mayor Cahill, go ahead.
Thanks, Madam President. I did just want to give a couple of other details for context. Dr. Trochik, when you, I'm not sure, it wasn't this slide, but when you were looking at, you were showing the governor's House 1 budget side by side with the FY20 budget, and in terms of the local aid numbers, the Chapter 70 numbers.
That one?
Yeah, there we are. Okay.
Oh, sorry, I went too far.
So just want to make sure that people do understand that when we're talking about the potential for a 15% local aid cut, let me just give a little context there too. The state in the past, in times of recession, they haven't always cut the different accounts in the same way. Chapter 70 is state money to the schools. Unrestricted general government aid is state money. It's essentially lottery money to cities and towns, directly to the municipal sides of the budget. They don't necessarily cut the two sides the same, but when you average them together, I think it was in the last recession, the total cut over 3 years was in the 24% range. When we are looking at, and we're not picking the number 15 out of the air, it is based on looking back at past recessions. It's based on conversations with other municipal finance directors and chief executives. It's based on conversations with the Department of Revenue and the governor's office. So we don't know for sure what they're going to land on, but we've been advised that 15% is not, as a low number, is not unreasonable. We hope that it's not that bad. We hope that it's no worse. But I want to make sure that I make the point that whatever the cut is, it will be a cut from the FY20 Chapter 70 number, not from the governor's budget, which was a proposal when things were looking really great with the economy, right? So, so just so that's clear, when we're talking 15%, we're talking about 15% from the 9257. So that said, I just want to make sure that we all understand what I believe I understand, and Mr. Ailes can correct me if I'm saying it wrong. If there is a 15% cut to the schools, or an average within the several accounts of 15%, what that would mean in terms of lost Chapter 70 revenue from the 9257 would be $1.388 million. So if we're able to collectively, because look, this is all the same pot of money, what goes into the school budget, what goes into the city budget. If we're able to, at the end of this process, push 1.5 million in new spending additional beyond last year's budget final number into the school budget, that doesn't just mean 1.5 million. It means that we first have filled that $1.388 million hole. So if we're able to get all the way to 1.5 million in new money, it will be because we've been able to take just about $2.9 million in new city money to put into the school budget for next year. It's not a guarantee that we can get to 1.5 in new spending. That's our hope, but just to give context that it really is first about filling whatever hole comes from a Chapter 70 cut and then trying to move forward. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Cahill. I'm not seeing any other hands. I'll do another call. Committee members, do we have questions? We're joined also by our city auditor, our finance director. We have Ms. Sherburne here at our disposal. Ms. Blansky's also standing by. Okay. If we don't have questions, I think our real action here is just to agree that the budget book will be published. The bottom line number or top line number, depending on how you're looking at it, is 62,577. Sorry, I have to look again. 517,942. And I think what the administration needs is our agreement that that's our number.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
are you looking for a motion?
I am. I'm fishing for one.
Okay, I'll make the motion that we accept the budget as presented this evening for a final total of $62,517,942.
And do I see a second?
Second.
Thank you. We're going to have to do a roll call vote this evening. Do we have any further discussion or questions now that we've heard the number out loud a couple times? Okay.
I have a question.
Oh, sure, Mr. Silva.
And this is something just to sort of think about moving forward. With technology being brought into the school system, I wonder how that over the years has helped streamline and reflect in savings. I would think that with technology in the school system, that there is an opportunity to utilize technology as a way to save and as a way to consolidate or find opportunities to save. I don't know if that has been looked at carefully as a way to perhaps find those savings or as a way perhaps in the future to plan ahead and create opportunities for saving.
That's interesting. Dr. Churchuk, maybe you can talk about some of the technology and some of the surprising costs.
Yes. So I'm not on mute, right? That's a great question, and I understand where you're coming from. I think that first of all, the most amazing thing that I think has arisen out of the closure of schools is the quick learning curve and professional growth that we've all had to undergo in terms of providing instruction via technology. And our teachers are, I would say, almost second to none right now in terms of the leveraging of technology as a tool. It also comes with challenges, particularly as we face a pandemic, because one of the challenges that I'm really considering as we reopen in our elementary schools right now, we are very well we're very well provisioned in terms of technology for a typical normal school day with 15 iPads in every classroom. With the current situation, shared devices is no longer a good option. So thinking about how we would get to a one-to-one access for students in our elementary schools is a real challenge that I'm struggling in this current budget. I'm looking really closely as to how I can capture funds so that we can make sure that we have devices available for every child so that they're not, the last thing, if you think about the transfer of the virus and some of the challenges that we're facing, contact surfaces are the real challenge that we have. And so sharing a device is not really, a good option. In terms of savings, I think that you're right. In an event, eventually there'll be savings. However, one of the things that also has occurred throughout the last 5 years as we transition to more digital-based learning is that all of the textbook producers and workbook producers are now providing their content via licensure. So our licensure expenses sort of have overtaken some of our what we used to call consumables, right? In the old days, we had a consumable line and we had consumable expenses and we had paper expenses. And while those go down, the licensure that we need to have in order to provide e-texts and in order to utilize some of the software that we use. So I think we're constantly looking at that, and I think that's a great question. And I actually spent the last 3 hours of this afternoon with our tech director, counting the number of iPads in the district district, looking at our budget, what's our sustainability plan as we go forward? How do we make sure that we are providing equitable access to all of our students? And what other new costs might we be incurring as we go about doing that? As well as, how I think if we can stabilize into a really good sustainability plan in the end, I think there may be some, what you're alluding to, I think, in terms of savings, but I think that it's actually a cost to get there. I don't know if I answered your question or anything, but.
No, I mean, I bring it up because, we've been using computers for a while. My son has gone through and graduated through the high school program, and I'm wondering if looking back at those numbers since we've introduced computers into the school system, has it been has realizing that there's an investment for the hardware and for the infrastructure, what has it done to the cost of education? And ultimately, when you get to the point where you have it in the system, there should ultimately be an opportunity to save, because you have these tools through the technology where you can communicate more effectively in a broader way, in a sort of maybe more students per teacher, per group, because you're able to sort of use that technology. I'm wondering if that's factoring in, not necessarily now, but I would hope that maybe in the future that this is something that we actively seek as an opportunity to save. And so I realize that we're still into this, but I think that it's something that really needs to be addressed, and we pay attention to be able to take advantage of that.
Thank you, Mr. Silva. I see Ms. Visnick has her hand raised.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let's see if I can put my hand down over there. Thank you. Dr. Churchick, I wonder if you could speak to maybe the opposite of what Mr. Silva was just asking you, but at our last meeting we talked about physical access and namely internet, and the fact that we know that some number of our students don't have that access, and that we need to put some access points in place, and that we as a district feel compelled, if it's part of our educational plan, then it should be part of our budget. And I don't see any entries in, now this is a very high level budget, but I wonder if you can speak to those numbers, those added costs of providing the access, especially in lieu of the fact that we're trying to do the equal access thing, and we know we have both an achievement gap and an opportunity gap, and we know we have children who right now are not engaged because of lack of access.
Yeah. So, we really have worked really hard to identify the access in terms of dollars. It's not a huge line. I think we have placed an order right now for 50 hotspots that will be arriving. I think that comes at a cost of between $20,000 and $25,000. So it's incorporated right now into the OT technology budget line. We were able to kind of figure out a way to do that. And yet, so I think the task is daunting. I think the challenge is we need to own that challenge. That is our responsibility to make sure that we can do our very best and make sure that if this is how we're providing education via technology and via internet, we need to make sure that every single one of our students can access that. And so 100% commitment on our part to do that. We have the one-to-one program at the high school is a lease program that, as you know, brings with it some challenges and some opportunities for us to support families in terms of how we make sure that those devices are available to them. I know Mrs. Taylor has been doing a great job at the high school during this closure, identifying families and making sure that every kid has the same equal access to the curriculum as everyone else in terms of a device use. But that's something that, again, I think that both of you are saying the same thing. There's this upfront cost that's going to cause us that we need to invest to make sure we can do it well. But I do agree, hopefully in more time, there will be savings in the end, right? If it becomes the way that we deliver business. We always have to be looking within our budget to reallocate resources within the budget. Instead of always looking for more money, we need to be able to take a look within the budget. And if we're doing something a different way, what can we eliminate? And I think that's what Mr. Silva was alluding to. So there must be some things you're eliminating if you've changed the way you're doing something. So, and what you're talking about is, and yet we need to make sure that no one is unable to access at the same level as anyone else what we're providing and the way we're providing it. And so that's the biggest challenges that we're facing right now. I think the creation of our task force that Gabrielle Montevecchi is sort of spearheading for us has really helped. Our principals have never been more aware of the need what engagement means, and we all talk daily about what does that mean and how do we understand engagement and how do we measure engagement. And so it's a whole, it's really brought a lot to the forefront. I said in a Connect Ed that I sent out before, the challenges of this closure have been unbelievably daunting. And yet I know that on the outside of all of this, on the other end of this, we're going to come out a stronger, better school district because of it. The things that we're learning about and the things that we're making adjustments for are things that, they're happening at such a rapid speed that it's going to station us as a stronger, better district. And I think in all of the areas that both of you are talking about right now. So.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Ms. Ducharmes. You're on mute.
Yeah, I got it.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Okay.
I was wondering, I don't want to put him on the spot, but I think I see Todd here. I was curious about the overall cost for the hotspots, because I think at Citywide PTO, they were talking about helping to supplement some of that cost. And I know at our last HANA PTO meeting, we voted to send a couple $100s to help offset some of that. I think it's probably only going to be a small amount of money in the overall scale of things, but I wonder if we have any information about any of the other PTOs helping to offset some of that cost.
So I can speak to that. I know that was something that each PTO sort of offered to do. We had a conversation of that in our last meeting. When we sort of began this process of trying to identify what we needed to do and how we needed to support our families, one of the first things we did was reach out to Bootstraps as first a community partner and as a fabulous community member who can help us connect with families, because some of this, as I said, it's not just a fiscal problem, it's an engagement problem, it's an identification problem, it's a delivery problem, it's, all of those things. And so we had a number of organizations who are asking, how can we help? And so far be it for me to ever turn down any help from anyone. We love help from all of our constituent partners and all of that. And so that's where that arose from. And so we're really grateful. I think that in our PTO presidents meeting that I had, they were all wondering, what could we do right now? I think people really want to help. People want to know. And because the old traditional ways of help have sort of dried up because there are no field trips and there are no other, sort of what can we do differently, and how in this new age of this new normal of remote learning, what could be helpful and how can we support? So, we're really grateful to the PTOs for agreeing to do that. I think that was a really, it just speaks to how wonderful our PTOs are all the time and always willing to kind of jump in, as well as Sue Gabriel, who is amazing and fabulous at Beverly Bootstrap. So, we're really grateful to all of our partners, and we're happy to accept help from anyone, anytime. It's a wonderful thing. So that, did that answer your question?
Yeah, I was generally curious how much of that was the 25,000 for the hotspots was going to be offset by PTOs, but they might still be voting on it. So
yeah, no, but that will be that will offset the cost. So we went ahead and ordered them because we wanted to get them. So there's like a week and a half lag. We want to make sure the sooner we can get the hotspots in place. So we ordered them, but that will absolutely be where that money goes. So yes, thank you.
No, thank you.
I'll call myself. I think we all saw in the F&F portion of this joint meeting that the cupboard for gifts to schools is a little bare for April, and certainly gifts to schools is a wonderful way to honor the good work that we're doing here, if anyone watching is so inclined. I'm looking for other hands. Are there other questions? We will need to take a roll call vote on moving forward with the $62,517,942 budget amount. But this is our opportunity to ask questions. I'm not seeing any questions. Are we ready for a roll call vote? Show of heads or thumbs up. Are we ready for a roll call vote? Ms. Ferretti and Mr. Milady, I can't see you, so I don't know if you're raising your hands or.
I'm sorry, that thumbs up from me.
Thank you. Okay. Thumbs up. Okay. Okay, let's start with our roll call vote. So we have a motion from Ms. Bisnick with a second from Ms. Coelho to put forward the $62,517,942 budget for FY21. As generally described by Dr. Churachek in her overview. That will be put out as a book by Tuesday at 2 p.m. by Ms. Sherburne and our administration for a public hearing next week. Mayor Cahill, how do you vote?
I'm going to vote yes. Just a quick question. Do
Sure.
you set the time of the public hearing now in that motion?
Oh, well, that wasn't part of Ms. Bisnick's motion because she's not telepathic. Do we want to amend the motion to say that the time of the public hearing will be 7 p.m. on Thursday, May 28th?
I believe I meant to say that, Miss Abel.
Okay.
My bad.
No, you know, that's a very good point, Mayor Cahill. So yes, it will be Thursday to allow us enough time to get that book published and for the advertisement to run in the newspaper, 7 p.m. May 28th. Thank you, Mr. Cahill, Mayor Cahill. Kimberly Coelho, how would you like to vote on this budget?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Ferretti?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Milady?
Yes.
Thank you. Karen Robinson?
Yes.
Thank you. Lorinda Visnick?
Yes.
And Rachel Abel, yes. So calculate 7-0 in the affirmative. The motion to put forward the budget of $62,517,942 for fiscal year 21 with a public hearing set for Thursday, May 28th at 7 p.m. Ms. Visnick?
I wish to ask if there will be a different mechanism for the public hearing so that will we advertise the Zoom link so everybody can join versus watching a live stream?
We've been working with our city clerk, who is very skilled in the public hearing area. Ms. Sherburne, did you have a further update? We have a few different ideas.
Yes. So we did put the advertisement in the newspaper, and in the advertisement, we did tell people that if they wanted to be able to speak at it, to email to citizenconcerns@beverlyschools.org, and that will go to the superintendent's office to put people on so that the president of the school committee can call on those people. One thing I did find this evening, as there were some people that could not get on because they did not have our Zoom link on our agenda, so I'll speak to Ms. Bergeron tomorrow about that we probably should have the link on our agenda so that people can get that. So my phone has been blowing up over here to the side of people saying, what is that link? So I did send that out when I was done with my F&F presentation. So that would be one area. The budget book will be available, and how we handled that is that we'd have people email to that same web email address, and we can then send it electronically to people because, as you know, the school building is closed, so normally people can come in and get that. It also will be available online on www.beverlyschools.org website.
Are there any public buildings that are open to the public or have a covered front porch area that we might produce a hard copy? I'm just imagining for people that see the advertisement in the paper and may not have the internet and the ability to accept an email. Is that something? I think the public library used to be the reference desk, but obviously that's closed.
Yes, I mean, we have it available in the superintendent's office, so therefore if Ms. Bergeron gets a call that somebody wants a copy, there are people, let me fix my English, working so that we can meet someone at the door. But right now, we are not open to the general public.
Okay.
And I'm not sure when that is actually going to happen. I would defer to Mayor Cahill and Superintendent Shirocek to answer that question.
Okay, so anyone watching on BevCam at home that does not have internet access or the ability to email that, certainly reach out to me. I'll give you my number right now, 617-308-8556. I'll make sure to connect you to the central office to get, copies for you to look at home. So that's
I can also give you the superintendent's telephone number is 978-921-6100, extension 21712.
Thank you so much. Okay, so anyone that wants to see those copies, they will be available Tuesday at 2 p.m., no later than. Okay, we have one more agenda item for the Committee of the Whole. So Chair Visnick, would you mind soliciting a motion to adjourn the F&F?
I do not mind that whatsoever. My F&Fers. Will someone please make a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Mr. Manzo. Can I have a second? Thank you. All right. Ms. Ducharme.
Ducharme, you got it.
Practice.
Okay.
I just really have to practice that.
Thank you for trying.
All right, so we have a motion, we have a second to adjourn our May 20th meeting of FNF. Roll call vote. I'm going to go right across on my screen. Ms. Coelho.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Silva.
Yes.
Ms. Ducharme.
Ducharme, you got it. Okay.
Let's see, who else is in here? Karen, I lost you. Karen, Miss Robinson.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Manzo.
Yes.
Myself, yes. We are officially adjourned. I thank you for attending the meeting this evening, and we're going to jump on a different Zoom and go into executive session. So really, you guys,
yeah,
go ahead.
I say we have to get there first, so nobody drop. Right. Even if you're on FNF, you're still on Committee of the Whole right now. So, okay. So yeah, thank you, FNF. You can watch this exciting part where the chair is going to move to convene in executive session pursuant to Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, for the following purposes. Purpose 7, which I will not forget this evening, is to approve our minutes from the following executive sessions of April 29th, 2020 and May 13th, 2020. And for purpose number 3, to discuss strategy with respect to and in preparation for collective bargaining with the teachers, Unit A, because an open discussion may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the committee, and not to return to open session. So this will adjourn our open session. We need a second on that motion.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Visnick. And we are going to do another roll call vote. Mayor Cahill?
Yes.
Thank you. Kimberly Coelho?
Yes.
Kelly Ferretti?
Yes.
John Mulady?
Yes.
Karen Robinson?
Yes.
Lorinda Visnick?
Yes.
Rachel Abel? Yes. By an affirmative vote 7-0, we are now entering into executive session. I'd like to remind my team here that we will be closing this open session. The same link will work with our confidential password. So give me a minute and 30 seconds to see you on the flip side. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for watching at home, and we will be in touch next week.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks.